My opponent would come out ahead on board is the term that you will hear in Magic. Oh my god, it's not coming out. Fuck! It's Magic time! Yay! Okay, I'm so excited. This is going to be a video or a series of videos, however this ends up getting chopped up depending on the length. For anybody who's interested in learning how to play Magic the Gathering. We're going to be playing on MTG Arena, which is a free-to-play client for the video game. When you first start it out, it takes you through a series of like very basic tutorials, and then you get more cards and more decks as you play. And so it's a really low barrier to entry introduction into this game. And I am going to be recording myself going through it and also adding in my own commentary and explaining my lines of thought and giving you tips and tricks that the game doesn't give you. So I hope that this is a really fun educational experience for anybody who's been curious about Magic but has felt a little too intimidated to try to get into it. So I want you to learn with me. It's gonna be a fun time. Okay, let's get started. This is basically like how the game starts out when you first boot it up. Wake up. It's time to wake up. I'm actually gonna move my model. I didn't think this through. When do I ever think anything through? Let's put myself down here in the corner. How's this? I'm kind of relatively out of the way. Okay, play a land. So in Magic, there are various different types of spell cards right here. If we blow up this image by right-clicking on it, you can see that we have a card called Shrine Keeper. And they will always have the card type listed down here in this middle section. And this one you can see is a creature. There are different types of cards in Magic. Some cards are creatures. Some cards are land cards. Some cards are sorcery spells, enchantments, artifacts. The list kind of goes on. In order to play our cards, our creature cards, we have to spend what is called mana or mana, however you want to pronounce it, to cast them. We get mana from land cards, which we put onto the playing field, the battlefield. You can see here Shrine Keeper is, like I said, a creature, and its subtype is human cleric. And you can see these symbols right here in the top right corner. All Magic cards typically have a cost associated with them, and the card will tell you how much it costs to play that card. In this case, for Shrine Keeper, you need two sources of white mana in order to cast it. And if you know, and you might have already been able to put together, you can see here, planes, it's got this white mana symbol on it. So, cost 2, you need 2 lands to be able to play this spell. So to start out, for our turn, we are going to start by placing a land onto the battlefield. I was just gonna say that. That's crazy. It's like our brains are on the same wavelength, or we share the same brain cell, whatever you are, you adorable glowing ball of light. Summon a creature. Okay, so you can only play 1 land a turn typically, unless you have some sort of effect that you've cast or have in play that allows you to play more than 1 per turn. But in general, as a new player, your understanding will be 1 land per turn if you have 1 in your hand. Fortunately, I have a second land in my hand, so we're gonna place it onto the battlefield, and bing bang boom, look at that. Now we have enough to pay the cost of this creature card like I was talking about. Now, the settings for the tutorial don't allow me to manually tap the lands. What I mean by tap is in Magic, in order to get the mana out of the land card, you have to turn it sideways and it becomes used for the turn. You basically, it expends the mana in it when you turn it sideways. So you'll see here, the way that the tutorial works, and this is a setting that I think you can change later on, I can only manually just drag this out and then it automatically will tap these for me. So you'll see these will both get turned sideways. So I'm going to drag it out. Boom. See the little like arrow symbol showing it getting turned sideways? We call that tapping, tapping for mana. So you would, I wish I could do it manually here to demonstrate it. And then yeah, that little tooltip that just popped up. My opponent played a land on their turn, didn't cast anything, passed the turn back to me. And at the beginning of my turn, the lands that were tapped on my turn previously, they untap and become available to use again. So once a land gets tapped in a turn, it is spent for that turn, typically. I'm going to say typically because there are effects that will untap them, but that's advanced stuff for later down the road. As a beginner, just think, once I spend this resource on my turn, I do not have access to it again for the rest of the turn until my next turn. To explain this better to a beginner player, if you're someone who's new to Magic, welcome again. It's an exciting world. It's gonna get crazy. Hold on. You're encouraged if you draw a land, if you have a land in your hand that you can play. This says you can only play one per turn. If you do have a land as a new player, you're typically encouraged to play it at the beginning of your turn so you don't forget to add a land to your board. It's really ideal to be adding a land to your board every single turn for at least the first several turns of the game, because the more lands you have, the more spells you can cast, and you can develop your board. And there are cards that will be in your deck that cost more than 2, for example. And so you want to be able to pay for your more expensive spells as the game goes on. So hitting your land drops every single turn is ideal. That's what we call it. We call it hitting your land drops. If you don't draw a land, like if this is my 3rd turn and I didn't draw a land, that would be called missing a land drop, because I didn't play a land on my 3rd turn, when on turn 3, I should ideally have 3 lands in play. So I'm going to do that. So as a new player, I'm going to play that first so I don't forget, because this is really important. And then this tooltip is telling me to summon a creature by dragging it onto the battlefield. And again, this is reminding me that like I should do this as a newer player now so I don't forget, because I don't want to accidentally pass the turn back to my opponent without developing my board further. And by developing my board further, I mean adding like another creature to my board or advancing my game plan. So I'm going to play this now before we enter combat. Really quickly, we should also explain, I wish this little floating orb wasn't here right now. We should explain these phases and steps down here at the bottom of the screen. Now, your turn is comprised of essentially these different phases. So you have a beginning, a main. What it doesn't show here is there's combat, a second main, and an end step. So the game is telling us, again, I was going to make a comment about holding this as a bluff card, but this is, again, that's more intermediate line of thought. So I'll save that for future videos. So, hey, hit that subscribe button and keep watching if you want to learn some more advanced tips and tricks that we'll get into later on in the series. But this is reminding me to just play my creature now because I'm a new player, so I don't forget to do this. So I'm going to play it now. Yeah. So this, oh, here, look at this handy tooltip. Look at how this game is so awesome in teaching you. So what that pop-up said is that this creature is summoning sick. So typically when you cast a creature, the turn that it gets put onto the battlefield, it has something called summoning sickness. You see this sort of like, I don't know what you call it, a smoky spiral dizzy effect going on over here. It's telling me that this creature is summoning sick. Oh, look, there's a little thing up on the top left right there. Summoning sick. Creatures can't attack on their first turn because it entered the battlefield this turn. So this creature is eligible to attack because if you remember, we played this one last turn. Last turn, we played it for the first time. It couldn't attack last turn because it also had summoning sick on that previous turn. But now that it is the next turn, the summoning sickness has fallen off. Shrinekeeper has awoken and is available to attack. Now, this tooltip is telling me click on each creature you want to attack with. Creatures can't attack on their first turn. So, yep, this guy's eligible. He'll be highlighted blue. If I left click on him, he turns orange and he's going to the face. Click the button in the bottom right to confirm your attacks, or click cancel attacks if you misclicked, but we want to attack. So now this looks like it's going to go over the way to read creature cards. So what it was trying to show us there is that there's something that we call power and something that we call toughness. Power is how much damage a creature deals in combat, and toughness is essentially like how much life a creature has, if you want to think of it that way, as like HP health points. Mouse over a card so we can inspect this elf warrior. You can see the little like sword and shield icons right there in the bottom right of the card that it's also doing. So again, if I right click on this to enhance the image, again, this is a 2/2. Typically how we describe when we read out magic cards, when we're reading out power and toughness, we read the first number first and then the second number. So like here we have Loxodon Linebreaker that we drew in our hand. We would read this creature, we would describe it as a 3/2, meaning that it has 3 power, which is how much damage it deals in combat, and 2 toughness or 2 health if that's easier, if that's an easier way to think about things. Now, I'm curious if the tutorial is going to explain how damage doesn't stick around after a turn ends, but we'll find out shortly. So let's also talk about how to read the cost of this card, because up until this point, we've had very straightforward. Shrinekeeper is 2 white mana, right? So it's like, okay, we have white mana, we have basic land, plains. Plains produce white mana. We just need 2 plains to pay for this cost. Now, if you look at the elephants, the elefante, that's Spanish for elephant, I'm pretty sure, that we just drew, you'll notice that this has a different looking cost in the top right, which might be confusing since we started off with something very straightforward like this. You're like, how the heck do I read this? What is this 2 and then the sun plains symbol? What does this mean? I have to sneeze. Oh my god, it's not coming out. Fuck. Okay. Anyway, maybe in a minute. Blah, blah, blah. So the way to read this is something called a converted mana cost. CMC. You might see that referred to in materials as CMC. If you ever see the term CMC in MTG, Magic the Gathering, that stands for converted mana cost. Basically what it means is we have to do math. Ugh. This is the only way that anyone will ever get me to do math, because I hate math. Math is just made up. But the way that you figure out a card's CMC, or converted mana cost, is by adding all the symbols in the top right up together. So what this means is you have 2 of any color. This gray, anytime you see a gray circle like this, a colorless circle with a number in it, this is 2 of any color. So any land, see this is like a forest. This forest produces green land. My plains produce white, or sorry, green. Forest land produces green mana because trees. Basic plains produce white mana because, I don't know, sun, wheat, things. So this 2 could be paid from any color that is produced by any land. So it doesn't really matter. Like, I could pay for this 2 if I had if these forests were on my side of the field. I could pay for this 2 with like 2 forests, 2 green sources. I could pay for it with a combination. I could pay for this 2 with a green and a white. It doesn't care as long as some mana is being put towards this. It doesn't care what color it is or where it comes from. But there's also this plain symbol here. It needs one, for sure, it needs 1 source of white mana from like a plains source, as an example. So our converted mana cost, we have to add, we have to do math. You take 2 plus the 1 symbol and you get 3. The converted mana cost of this card is 3. So we have to pay for 1 of the 3 with a white source, which we have here. The other 2 can come from anything. Now, we're a mono white deck, which means that all land sources and all cards in our deck are white. So it's not very complicated in this case, but you can play multicolored decks that have more than 1 color. So maybe if we were like a white-green deck, we could pay for this with 1 and then 2 with whatever, like I explained. Anyway, sorry, that was a really long-winded explanation, but it's kind of confusing. And I don't know if the game explains that here early on. So anyway, again, we're a new player. We drew this creature. We should play it first so that we don't forget to play it before we end our turn. So we're going to pay for our 3 CMC Elefante with the 3 lands we have in play. Boom, boom, boom. Elephants on the battlefield. Again, our big boy is summoning sick because they got summoned this turn, so they can't attack this turn. He has to sit out until next turn. He's a little dizzy from getting slammed on the battlefield. But remember, this guy who couldn't attack last turn, he can now attack. And this one, of course, we already knew could attack too. So we have a couple options. We could double click on, or we could just click on each creature we want. There's also this big red button down in the bottom right that will send everything into the red zone. So bada bing, bada boom. And then we declare attackers. Like that. I've been blocked. No. Power. Toughness. Battle. Oh, you got me. Oh, does it just loop? Okay, it's just gonna loop, so this is perfect. Okay, so here's how I gotta mute the sound because I have ADHD and I literally can't think when I hear the sounds going off in the background. So I'm gonna mute that for a second. So what this animation is attempting to convey to you is, again, power is the first number. That's how much damage a creature deals. Toughness is how much health a creature has. So these 2 creatures have identical stats. Each of them is going to deal 2 damage to the other creature. And because each other creature only has 2 toughness or 2 health, if that helps you think of it that way, you know, 2 damage to 2 health will result in 0, and therefore it has 0 toughness left over, which means that it dies. Hopefully that makes sense. I can turn the sound back on again. Man, having a brain is tough when your brain can't handle too much stimuli. That's a big boy. All right, so they're gonna play Rumbling Baloth. You're not wrong, friend. So, okay, let's take a quick moment again to break down these cards. This is me just trying to go through some of the stuff that I think is really important to learn and might be a little bit hard to understand as a beginner player, even with a tutorial. So hopefully my explanations add some value. If not, I don't know, thumbs down on the video. I'll do whatever you want. But I hope that it's insightful. Okay, so again, let's put our math skills into practice. Going back to CMC, or converted mana cost, here's a pop quiz chat. What's the CMC of Rumbling Baloth? If your answer is 4, congratulations, you're correct. Because, yeah, so 2 colorless and 2 forests. That gives us 2 + 1 + 1 is a total of 4. If only my kindergarten teacher could see me now. And so again, oh my god, I had to double check OBS because I'm like, what if I'm not recording? I just had a heart attack. I was like, did I remember to press record? If I forgot to press record and I got this far, how far am I in? I'm like 18 minutes into recording or something like that. I would retire. Anyway. So yeah, so once again, like we talked about, like with the Elefante here, Baloth also has a colorless cost. So 2, this needs to be paid with 2 mana of any color, doesn't care. But for the rest of the cost, it does require specifically 2 green sources. So you would need sources from like 2 forests, for example, to pay for this. And then these 2 could come from anywhere, like plains, for example. This one has a power of 4 and a toughness of 4, so it dwarfs all of our creatures. This is a big boy right here. He's thick. Damn boy, he's thick. Okay. Now, again, a more intermediate line of play might be that we hold on to this land and we don't play it from our hand because we have no other spells to play. We could hold on to this land and bluff that it's some actual scary, devastating card and try to trick our opponent. But as a beginner player, in this case, we don't want to miss our land drops and forget about land drops, so we're just going to go ahead and play it. Now, you're not wrong about that. One thing I want to point out here, when someone has no cards in hand, like myself, our opponent now has what I would call perfect information because they know everything going on our side of the battlefield and there's no surprises waiting in my hand. They know exactly what cards are in play and they can read those cards and understand like what they're capable of doing. They know how many lands I have and they know that I have no cards in hands, so there's no surprise spells that I could cast, no traps to be activated, so to speak. Whereas I do not have perfect information on my opponent. I have near perfect information. I know they have a creature that's bigger than mine. I know they have 4 lands, but they have 1 card, and I don't know what that card is. That card could be anything. So I have almost perfect information, but I don't have perfect information, unlike my opponent who knows exactly what's going on my side of the board. Now, our little friend over here told us that if we attack now, it's not a good idea because their creature dwarfs both of our creatures. So this creature would get to eat a creature of their choice in combat. So really quickly, something that the tutorial hasn't explained that I want to go over is the way that combat works in Magic. This is different from other games that you might be familiar with. I think, and this is I could be wrong because I don't play other card games right now, but I believe in like Yu-Gi-Oh, for example, or Pokemon, right? Or what's the other doesn't Riot have a card game? Anyway, I believe in those card games, when you have creatures on the field, you say my creature attacks your creature and deals this much damage to it, and your creature loses this much life. Magic doesn't work that way. I can't say, hey, I want my Loxodon Linebreaker to deal 3 damage to your Rumbling Baloth, right? The way that you deal damage and attack in this game is you declare attackers. You can see the lines going to my opponent's face. We attack face. That's what we call it in Magic the Gathering Arena. I can word. You attack face. So again, I can't be like, Loxodon Linebreaker, attack Rumbling Baloth. It doesn't work that way. You see how that's not like an eligible target? The only eligible target on the field currently is my opponent's up here. So when you enter the combat phase in Magic, you declare attackers. So what would happen hypothetically is if I sent both of these into the red zone is what we call it, which is where combat happens. The bloody battlefield, the red zone. The battlefield runneth red with blood. I would declare my attackers, and then my opponents, if they have creatures available to block, they could declare blockers and choose to block any of my creatures that are in combat. So hypothetically, if I sent both of these into the red zone, this big boy right here could jump in front of one of them. Only one of them, though. There's only one of the Baloth, and there's two of my creatures. So Baloth could block one of my creatures, but the other one would go unblocked because there's only one of this guy, and it would still hit my opponent in the face. But I don't necessarily want to do that because my creatures are both smaller than the Baloth. So the Baloth gets to eat one of my creatures for free is what we typically, the way that you might hear that described, that interaction. This Baloth gets to eat one of my creatures for free because my creatures only do 2 damage or 3 damage. This creature has a toughness of 4. So like, for example, even my biggest creature, the elephants, can't kill the Baloth. 3 damage against 4 toughness. This thing would go down to 1 toughness, but it would still survive the turn. It wouldn't die, whereas this would deal 4 damage to my 2 toughness elephants, and the elephant would die because it would wind up with a toughness of -2, right? 4 damage, 2 toughness, -4 because it took 4 damage. Math. This would end up -2, it would die. This would only take 3 damage, but it has 4 toughness. 4 minus 3 equals 1. It would survive. It would not go down to 0 or negative, therefore it would survive. Now, another thing that the game hasn't explained yet is that unlike other games, like again, I think Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, where when a creature takes damage, I believe the damage stays. So like a creature in like Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon, and if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comment section below. If I'm right, give me head pats in the comment section below. So like, if this were a game like that where it functioned the same, where damage stays, 3 damage would get dealt to the Baloth, 4 health minus 3 damage would be 1, and then this would be stuck on 1 health for the rest of the game until more damage was dealt to it and it died. Magic doesn't work that way. At the end of every turn, any damage that has remained on a creature falls off. It goes away. So this thing would reset back to 4 toughness at the end of every turn. No matter how much damage, as long as it's still alive at the end of that turn, as long as it still has positive toughness. So if this has 1 remaining toughness at the end of this turn, it would go back up to 4 health and it would be healthy again once this turn ends. So that's why, like, even if I was like, oh, well, I can throw away my Loxodon and Linebreaker to deal 3 damage to this thing. So this thing is only like 1 toughness. It's only on 1 health for the rest of the game. So maybe that'd be kind of worth it because I can kind of get it later. It doesn't work that way. This thing would reset back to full health at the end of the turn. So throwing away these creatures, it doesn't really make sense. Here's another reason why. So like I explained, they have 1 blocker and I have 2 attackers. So I could attack with both creatures. Baloth would block my best creature and eat it for free. This guy would go unblocked and connect to face and deal 2 damage to my opponent who's on 4 health. They would fall to 2 health. 4 health minus 2 damage. This is the most math I ever do in my life. Let me make that abundantly clear. This player would go down to 2 health. But then how would the battlefield look after that exchange? They would eat my best creature for free. And then, so this would go away. This would go to the graveyard to be dead. So I would be left with just a measly 2/2 guy. I have no cards in hand. I have nothing else to add to my board at the end of this turn. And my opponent would have a bigger creature left that survives the turn on their side. So even though I would get my opponent low, my opponent would come out ahead on board is the term that you will hear in Magic. They would be ahead on board because their board state is better. They would have a bigger creature. They also have more lands. They also have a card in hand as well, so they have more cards. So this attack makes no sense. Just to deal 2 damage, but then wind up with an inferior board state that leaves me in a weaker position for the rest of the game. I know I'm also just realizing I said they have more lands. I can't math, bro. We both have 4 lands, dude. I can't math. Anyway, this is a stupid attack. We're going to cancel attacks, and we're going to say no attacks. Here, big blue button for no. That was a really long-winded explanation. Are you staying with me? Wake up. I hope that, again, Magic is a complicated game. I'm doing my best to explain. Oh, no. Feral roar. Okay. A spell has made this creature stronger temporarily. So, let's take a pause here again because the tutorial is kind of moving fast. And I'm sure that if you're a brand new player interacting with Magic, you might be like, whoa, what is going on? What was that card? What is that? How did that card work? What kind of card is that? So I'm doing my best to like stop and explain. If my explanation is way too long-winded, I encourage you to just download the game because it's free and then play through the tutorial. And you can go through at mock Jesus and you don't have to listen to me ramble on and try to explain things in greater detail. But if you are someone who has a lot of questions and wants a more detailed explanation, that's what I'm here for. Hello. Don't forget to like the video. Leave a thumbs up so the YouTube algorithm knows that this is helpful for new players. Please, Kay, thanks. Bye. Bye. Don't go. Okay, so my opponent played Feral Roar. This is a 2-cost spell. Remember our CMC. 1 colorless this time instead of like the 2 colorless we've been seeing. So 1 color of any color, and then a green needs to be paid to cast this spell. This is a new spell type that we haven't seen so far. This is a sorcery because it's Magic the Gathering. See, we've seen creatures so far. We've seen basic lands. Now we're seeing our first sorcery spell. So the way sorcery spells work are they have an effect. So you play the card. When the card resolves, activates, maybe that's another word that, because resolves might be confusing. But when the card goes off, let's just say, this affects the text on the card happens. It resolves. It happens. And then a sorcery spell will go to the graveyard. This is the graveyard over here, by the way, next to the pile. This is your library. We should have explained this at the very beginning of the game, Ryoma. This is your library. This is your deck of cards. This is what we call your library. Next to your deck of cards is your graveyard. I believe, is it Pokemons? In that card game, they referred to it as the discard pile. So you could think of it this, but basically when things die or they are expended or spent, they go to the graveyard. So you can see this is where my opponent's graveyard is. They cast this spell from their hand and it went to their graveyard after it resolved or went off, after it popped off. Again, Magic is complicated, but you just read the text and the text tells you what is going on. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So they targeted their Rumbling Baloth, which remember was a 4/4, but then it added +4 to power, because remember the first number ahead of the slash is power, and it also gave it +4 toughness. So it became bigger. Sip some water. Okay. I'm talking a lot. Oh my god, my voice. I need some tea. So yeah, 4 + 4 = 8. Incredible. Incredible math. Inspirational. So yeah, now he's a huge boy. So again, that sequence of events was my opponent tapped 2 lands to pay for this 2-mana spell, the sorcery. When a sorcery resolves, it goes to the graveyard. And when it resolves, it also has this effect written on it take place. Made their boy really big and really angry. And very feral, apparently. Wow. So now we are also in combat. Our opponent has declared Rumbling Baloth as their attacker. Another thing that I should have mentioned earlier is when you declare, because again, the game doesn't seem to do this either, which is fine. That's what I'm here for. Thanks for letting me make some content. You can see the little tap symbol. Remember, like when we tap a land for mana, you get this little arrow symbol and the card gets turned kind of sideways. This card is tapped. When you declare an attacker, it becomes tapped. It gets turned sideways and then it remains tapped or turned sideways for the rest of your turn and also the duration of your opponent's turn until it comes back all the way around to your turn again. Hopefully that makes sense. Kind of like your lands. You tap them on your turn, you spend things, and they stay tapped throughout the rest of your turn, the rest of your opponent's turn, and then it comes all the way back around to your turn once again, and then things untap and they're free to be used again. So tap your creature sideways, send it into the red zone. The bloody battlefield. So now we're getting attacked by a gigantic, really angry looking, what's a Baloth? It says beast. Kind of looks like Angie buff lizard man. But yeah, anyway, ADHD Bringo Burr. So this is a problem because if this creature deals 8 damage and we only have 7 life, we would die. If this hit us in the face, we would die. Just outright, we would go to -1 life. GG, Game's over. So we need to block this. This is a scenario where we absolutely have to block this creature. We can't let it hit us in the face. So we have options. To block, click or drag one of your creatures into an attacking creature. So we can choose a creature like this, left click, and you see this little arrow. Woo! We could say, I declare Shrine Keeper a blocker on Rumbling Baloth. You can kind of see this gold line will indicate like where the block is happening, right? So if I select Elefante, I know it's called line breaker. It's like saying Elefante. Look, now we have a line going Baloth to Elefante. So that's how you declare a blocker. You can even stack blockers onto an attacker like this and do what we call a double block. If there was 3 creatures on our side, we could even highlight 3 creatures and do what we call a triple block. You kind of get the idea. So let's go over some logic for blocking here. Now, in what scenario would we want to block with both of our creatures? If this Baloth was still the little baby 4/4, baby being used ironically here because 4/4 is still bigger than both of our creatures. But if this creature was a 4/4 and we wanted to try to kill it in combat, we could combine the power of Loxodon Linebreaker and Shrine Keeper and block the Baloth. And the damage would be dealt by both creatures to the Baloth. So 2 damage from the Shrine Keeper would go to Baloth, and 3 damage from the Elephant would go to Baloth. And if the Baloth was still the 4/4 before this effect happens, right there, 2 plus 3 is 5, and the Baloth originally only had 4 health. So we would deal 5 damage to a 4 toughness creature, and we would kill it in combat. It would also kill our creatures because 4 damage, 2 would go to this, and 2 would go to this, right? The damage gets spread out. So all of our creatures would die, or trade is the term that we use. They would all trade because they die, they die, they die, even trade all around. It doesn't make sense in this case, right? Because 2 power from this guy plus 3 power from this guy is only 5 damage combined. And now Baloth has a toughness of 8. So 5 damage would go to 8, and it would still have 3 toughness left over. So it would still live, right? It would be at 3 health, and then the turn would end, and it would go back up. Well, it actually reset. It would go to 4. It would go back to its original stats. But the point being that we wouldn't be able to kill it with these combined. So there's no point in double blocking. Yeah, all of that to say, double blocking is a bad idea here. If this was a normal size Baloth, it would maybe be an option. It would maybe be a play. It is not a play here. So then how do we block effectively to stay alive and not take 8 damage to our 7 health face and live for the turn? Now, it doesn't make sense to block. Our best creature right now is Loxodon Linebreaker, right? Elefante Soldier. What's soldier in Spanish? Comment down below. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to block because whatever creature blocks the Baloth is going to die. Just outright, it's just going to get smashed, right? So let's not throw away our best creature. We do need the block though, however. So unfortunately, Shrine Keeper, you have drawn the short straw for this exchange. So we're going to block with our worst creature to just tank the damage, right? We're going to do this. Now, when we block with a creature that we know inevitably is just going to die, it is the sacrificial lamb. Its sole purpose in this exchange is to die and to tank the damage for our health. So when we block with something that we know is smaller, can't kill our opponent's creature, and is just outright just a sacrifice, it's just going to die. This is something that we call a chump block. You'll hear this term chump block or chump blocking in MTG. And this is what that term refers to. Again, it's a scenario in which you chump, you throw away your little chump. They just jump in front of the bigger creature to save health, and they're just going to die. Sorry, Shrine Keeper. You did good. So there we go. Shrine Keeper took all of the damage, and we stay at 7 health. And we're still alive. Even a small creature will block all of the damage. Now, there are effects in this game that actually allow the damage to carry over to our health total, but that's something that we'll get into later. It's called Trample, but we're not dealing with that yet. Cast a sorcery spell. Remember how they had a sorcery? Well, we have drawn a sorcery off the top of our library. How convenient! So, take Vengeance. Again, CMC, our converted mana cost is 2. One of the two needs to be paid with any color, and then one does have to be a white mana source. Sorcery, destroy target tapped creature. remember how we tell when something is tapped? It has this little arrow and it is turned sideways. And so remember how I was talking about how our opponent spent 2 mana. They tapped 2 lands last turn and they stay tapped. And remember, I also said when you declare a creature as an attacker, it becomes tapped and it stays tapped for the rest of that turn. So my opponent's turn and also my turn. See, it's my turn now and their creature and their lands are still tapped. So take vengeance, destroy target tapped creature. This creature is tapped, therefore it is an eligible target. Now, this text is important. Target means that you have to declare a target. Like you have to point at something and declare it the target. And in order for it to be an eligible target to be declared, it has to fulfill this criteria that follows the word target. Target tapped creature. If this Baloth was untapped, like my elephant right here, which is not tapped, you see, it's just straight up and down. It's not sideways, doesn't have the arrow. If this Baloth was also like straight up and down, no arrow symbol, wasn't tapped, it would not be an eligible target for this card. Destroy target tapped creature, it would not fulfill this requirement right here. Therefore, I would not actually be able to destroy it with this card. But we're in luck. How handy, how convenient. The creature is tapped, so it is an eligible target. So we drag this out, and you see, we declare it as a target. If it wasn't an eligible target, it would be grayed out, but it's got this nice little blue aura to easily tell us it's eligible. Bada bing, bada boom, our spell resolves. Now, the path is clear. So again, remember the way damage works in this game. You don't declare attackers against creatures. You declare attackers against face. 1 attacker. Boom. 3 damage. They go down to 1 HP. They play a little 2-2. They have 2 2-2s. 2 2-2s. You've got me cornered. Oh no. Finish her. Blinding Radiance. This has a converted mana cost of 3. 2 + 1 is 3. Tap all creatures your opponents control with toughness 2 or less. So again, it's another sorcery card. We'll discover more different types of cards as this series goes on. But tap all creatures your opponents control with toughness 2 or less. This fulfills that criteria, toughness 2. This fulfills that criteria because they're the same card, toughness 2. Tap, meaning we turn it sideways. The other thing that the game hasn't explained is that when a creature is tapped on the board, that creature cannot block. So when we tap these creatures, let's go ahead and cast this spell. It's going to tap the creatures that were toughness 2 or less. Creatures tap when they attack. Tapped creatures can't block. That's really important. So when you attack with a creature on your turn, you are also conceding that you can't block with that creature if your opponent decides to attack you on their turn. If your creature is tapped from attacking or from an effect like a spell that tapped them sideways, they can't protect your face. So these are now tapped like this. They have the little arrow. They're sideways. They cannot block. Smash opponent in the face. GG. Well, fat. Yay, we made it through our first match. It only took me 40 minutes to explain. I'm so sorry. Oh my god, dude. What is bro yapping about? I rambled quite a bit. Let's go ahead past this victory screen. But I hope this is really... Magic is complicated. You can try to simplify Magic as much as you want, but the problem is that you leave out a bunch of like really important details. So again, if this type of thing is too complicated for you or too yappy, then I recommend downloading the game and just playing. But this is all like really helpful information that will set you up for success later on. And as you can see, what's really cool is as we play, we will unlock cards. As we play more, we will unlock more decks as well. So we'll get to experiment with like different colors and build our own stuff. So this is fun. So let's put our reading comprehension skills to the test. Okay. I'm enhancing the image. That's why this is a zoomed version. Spiritual Guardian. It is a 5 converted mana cost card. 3 + 1 + 1, right? 3 colorless, 1 white, 1 white. Costs 5. It's a more expensive spell than anything that we played last game. It is a creature card. It's not a sorcery, it's not a land, it's a creature. And it's a spirit type as well. That becomes relevant in certain, effects and spells and blah, blah, blah. And then the text, when Spiritual Guardian enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. So when you play this card from your hand and it resolves and it hits the board, you actually gain 4 life. So pretty cool. And it is a 3 power and 4 toughness creature. It's also bigger than anything we played during that introductory game as well. So it's a bigger creature. It's more expensive, but it's bigger, and it has an enter the battlefield effect is what we call it. Anytime something triggers when it hits the battlefield and it does an effect, That's an enters the battlefield effect. Another way to evaluate this card is we would call this card a 2-for-1. And what I mean by that is you get 2 effects for the price of 1, essentially. You pay the cost and you get a creature, but not only did you get a creature, you also gained life. You got 2 benefits from 1 card. 2-for-1s are great. We like value. We like value in this house. That was it for the first video. Welcome to my introduction to Magic series. I didn't think it would be this long, but oh my god. If you've watched to the end, thank you. I hope that you found this informative and entertaining. Consider subscribing and sticking around and watching the other videos so you can learn more about Magic. We're going to keep going down and divulging all my tips and tricks and lines of thought, and you're going to become the best Magic player ever. You're going to crush all your opponents, and more importantly, you're going to crush your friends' spirits when you defeat them in combat, and you can hold it over them for the rest of your friendship, which may be short-lived after you've defeated. But then you can be like, oh, you didn't like that beating that I just handed you? You should have watched Ryoma's MTG tutorials. You should go subscribe to his YouTube channel and watch them, and then maybe in 100 years, you could be good enough to challenge me again. Okay, bye.